Ever get that like sinking feeling when someone, doesn't quite live up to what you were, I don't know, hoping
Oh,
for
yeah, totally. Happens all the time, right?
all the time? So today we're going to like really get into that whole expectation thing.
Okay, yeah.
Specifically how like managing those expectations, especially the ones we have about other people, can seriously affect like our relationships and even our own, happiness and all that.
Makes sense.
And our guide for this deep dive is, get this, an excerpt from Mastering the Art of Expectations, the key to unlocking fulfillment in relationships.
Catchy title.
Right.
Oh.
So there's this part in the text that really hit home for me. It talks about how, like, when our expectations, those hopes and dreams we have don't actually match up with, well, reality.
Uh-huh.
It can trigger a whole bunch of, negative emotions, disappointment, frustration.
Even resentment sometimes.
Totally. It's like, ugh, why didn't things go the way I thought they would?
It's really common, actually. And the text goes into the whole psychology behind it. Like, have you ever heard of cognitive dissonance?
Maybe. Refresh my memory.
Basically, it's that mental discomfort we feel when our beliefs clash with what actually happens.
Oh, right.
So, like, if we expect someone to act a certain way and they totally don't,
Yeah.
it throws us off balance, creates that, like, internal conflict.
It makes total sense. It's like that time I was venting to a friend about this crazy thing at work, and instead of like, being supportive, they just started going on and on about their own problems.
Oh, classic.
I felt totally unheard.
And right there, your expectation that your friend would be there for you offers support. Well, it wasn't met.
Yeah.
That's what leads to that dissonance feeling. And the text, it really stresses how crucial it is to recognize those emotional triggers,
Yeah.
Because that awareness, that's like step one to managing expectations better.
So like if we're always getting hit with these unmet expectations, it can't be good for us.
Right. Exactly. Clinging to rigid expectations, it's a recipe for stress, anxiety, the whole 9 yards.
No thanks.
Right. But the text, it does this cool thing where it paints a picture of what life could be like if we actually mastered this whole managing expectations thing. Like, imagine feeling calmer, less reactive, more, I don't know, in sync with the people around you.
Okay, that sounds pretty amazing. I'm in. But like, how do we get there?
Well, the text highlights a bunch of benefits. One of the biggies is, you guessed it, less stress.
Okay, stress is the worst. I'm listening.
When we ease up on those super rigid expectations, we're not putting so much pressure on ourselves or others.
Right, because it's like, if I expect you to act a certain way and you don't,
Exactly.
I get stressed, you probably get stressed. It's a whole thing.
And letting go of that, it's like taking a deep breath and just releasing all that tension leads to more peaceful relationships too, for sure.
Totally. Because if I'm less stressed about what you're doing or not doing,
Exactly.
the whole vibe is just calmer.
The text also talks about how managing expectations can actually boost our empathy, which I think is pretty cool.
Empathy, like being able to understand where someone else is coming from.
Exactly. And it's like by letting go of those super strict expectations, we become more understanding, more open to other people's perspectives, even if they're totally different from ours.
So instead of immediately jumping to like, ugh, they messed up,
Yeah.
we take a second to consider what might be going on for them.
Right. We become more curious, more compassionate. And honestly, that shift in mindset, it can totally transform how we interact with people.
That makes me think about a time when I was like really annoyed at a coworker.
Oh, yeah. What happened?
They weren't pulling their weight on a project, and I just assumed they were slacking off.
Happens.
But when I finally talked to them, turns out they were dealing with a family emergency, super overwhelmed, didn't even know how to ask for help.
See, communication is key. And that's another big point the text makes.
Okay, so how do we get better at communicating our expectations?
Well, first off, being upfront about our needs and boundaries. That's huge.
But how do we do that without sounding like, I don't know, bossy or demanding?
It's all about how you say it. Instead of, you always do this. Try focusing on how their actions make you feel.
Oh, okay.
For example, you could say, when you cancel plans last minute, I honestly feel disappointed because I was really looking forward to hanging out.
Oh, so instead of blaming them,
Yeah.
I'm explaining how it affects me. I like that.
Exactly. And just as important is actually listening to the other person's perspective.
Even if we don't agree with it.
Especially if you don't agree. It's about creating that open dialogue, bridging the gap between what we expect and what's actually happening.
Solid advice.
Oh, and one more thing the text really stresses. We can't control other people.
Oh, I know, it's so frustrating.
We can try to influence them, sure, but ultimately, their choices are their own. What we can control are our own reactions.
So it's about focusing on how we respond to things, not trying to force others to change.
Exactly. It's empowering,
I
actually.
can see that. Wow, this has been like eye-opening. So to sum it up, managing expectations. Less stress, better relationships, and even some personal growth along the way.
Nailed it.
But before we wrap things up, I want to leave you with something to think about. We've been talking a lot about expectations about other people. But what about the expectations we put on ourselves? Those goals, those shoulds, all those pressures we carry around.
Interesting.
What if we applied this whole managing expectations thing to like our own inner critic? Could that lead to, I don't know, even more happiness, more fulfillment?
Something to ponder for sure.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everybody. It's been real. And keep exploring this whole expectations thing. It's seriously life-changing stuff.